Reynolds felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. His entire career, his entire identity was hanging in the balance. He could fight this. He could deny everything, push back, walk away. Or he could face the truth. A long silence stretched between them. Then finally, Reynolds took a slow breath, his hands unclenched. And in that moment, he made his choice. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, a voice cut through the air. "Officer Reynolds." They all turned. Standing on the sidewalk was the young man from the photo, the same one Reynolds had stopped months ago. And the look on his face said everything. The story wasn't over yet. Reynolds felt his chest tighten as he locked eyes with the young man. He looked different now, not just older, but more sure of himself. There was no fear in his stance this time, only quiet recognition. The street felt eerily still as everyone waited for what would happen next. The captain turned to the young man and gave a small nod. "I asked him to come," he said, glancing at Reynolds. "I thought you should meet him again, under different circumstances." Reynolds' throat felt dry. He wanted to say something, but what could he say? Sorry, didn't mean to, none of it felt like enough. The young man took a step forward. "Do you even remember me?" His voice was calm, but there was something behind it, something that told Reynolds that Stop had stayed with him for a long time. Reynolds swallowed hard. He did remember. Not just the stop, but the way the kid had looked at him, confused, scared, unsure why he was being treated like a suspect. "I remember," Reynolds said, his voice lower than he expected. The young man studied him and nodded. "That night, I went home and told my dad what happened. You know what he said?" He let the words hang before answering his own question. He said, "You met one of the bad ones tonight. But not all of them are like that." He tilted his head. I wasn't sure if he was right. Reynolds felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't ignore anymore. Monroe crossed her arms. "So, Officer Reynolds, what now?" The question wasn't just about this moment. It was about everything. About who he was before today and who he would be after. Reynolds let out a slow breath. He thought about the badge on his chest, what it was supposed to mean. Then he looked at the young man again. "I don't know if I can fix what happened that night," he admitted, "but I can make sure it doesn't happen again." The captain gave a small nod, as if that was the only answer he had been waiting for. The young man studied Reynolds for a moment longer, then simply said, "I hope so." And with that, he turned and walked away. Reynolds stood there, watching him go, knowing he would never forget this moment. He had spent years believing he was doing the right thing, but today had changed everything. And now, it was up to him to decide what kind of officer he would be tomorrow. 2 years. The captain nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And in those 2 years, how many times have you pulled someone over because you had an feeling? Reynolds hesitated. He knew the truth, but saying it out loud was different. I don't know." The captain nodded again, as if he expected that answer. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Let me ask you something, Reynolds. If I were a white man, dressed the same way, driving the same car, would we be standing here right now?" Reynolds' stomach tightened. His mouth felt dry. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe that. But deep down, something told him the truth wasn't so simple. A radio crackled in the patrol car, but neither of them moved. Across the street, an older woman peered out from behind her curtain watching them. Reynolds knew how this looked. He knew what people would assume. The captain followed his gaze, then shook his head. "This moment, right here, this is why people don't trust us." His words were sharp, but not cruel. Just honest. You ever think about that? Reynolds clenched his jaw. He had thought about it, but not like this. Not with himself in the middle of it. The captain sighed again, rubbing his temple like a man who had dealt with this too many times before. "You got a choice, Reynolds. You can walk away from this and pretend it never happened. Or," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Or you can learn from it. Reynolds swallowed hard. What do you mean? The captain studied him for a long moment. I'm not filing a report. Not yet, but that doesn't mean this is over. Reynolds' heart pounded. He should have felt relieved, but instead, a new kind of fear settled in, because now he wasn't just facing a mistake, he was facing the truth. And the truth had a way of changing everything. Reynolds felt his pulse hammering in his ears. His instincts told him to walk away, to nod and say, "Yes, sir," and put this behind him. But the captain's stare held him in place. There was something about the way he said asterisk, "This isn't over asterisk." It wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. A voice crackled over the radio again, snapping Reynolds out of his thoughts. His partner was checking in. He glanced at his car, tempted to respond, to shift the moment away from the tension pressing down on him. But the captain wasn't giving him an escape. He stood firm, waiting. Then the captain did something Reynolds didn't expect. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. Reynolds felt his stomach drop. Who was he calling? His superior? Internal affairs? His heart pounded as he fought the urge to stop him. But when the captain finally spoke into the phone, his words caught Reynolds off guard. "Yeah, it's me," he said. "I need you to come down here, now." Reynolds frowned, confused. The captain wasn't reporting him. He was calling someone in. But who? Minutes passed, dragging painfully slow. The air between them grew heavier. Reynolds shifted on his feet, trying to shake the unease growing inside him. The captain just stood there, arms crossed, unreadable. Then a car pulled up. Not a patrol car, but a sleek black sedan. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a sharp suit, moving with a kind of confidence that made Reynolds feel even smaller. Reynolds stiffened. He recognized him immediately. Asterisk, asterisk, Deputy Chief Sanders, asterisk, asterisk, one of the highest-ranking officers in the department. His throat went dry. This wasn't just a lesson anymore. This was something bigger. The deputy chief walked straight to the captain and shook his hand. Then he turned, eyes locking onto Reynolds with an expression that sent a chill down his spine. "You must be Reynolds," Sanders said, his voice calm but firm. "I hear we need to have a conversation." Reynolds didn't dare move. His mind raced with possibilities. Was this the end of his career? A formal reprimand? Worse. The captain finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying more weight than any shouting ever could. "This is the part where you decide what kind of officer you really want to be." Reynolds swallowed hard, realizing there was no turning back now. Whatever was about to happen next, asterisk, it was going to change everything asterisk. Reynolds' hands felt clammy as he stood there, trapped between the captain and the deputy chief. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, like they were peeling back every layer of who he thought he was. The street around them seemed to shrink, the noise of passing cars fading into the background. Deputy Chief Sanders took a step closer. "Tell me, Officer Reynolds," he said, his voice measured. "If we pulled the body cam footage from this stop, would it match the story you'd write in your report?" Reynolds' stomach twisted. He knew exactly what the footage would show: his rigid posture, his sharp tone, his impatience, the way he had assumed control without cause, and the way the captain had calmly shattered his confidence with nothing but the truth. He opened his mouth, searching for an answer, but before he could speak, the radio in his patrol car crackled to life. "Unit 23, we have a disturbance reported at the corner of Lexington and 5th. Possible altercation. Backup requested." Reynolds exhaled, relief flooding him. This was his chance. An out. Something real, something urgent. "I should respond to that," he said quickly, reaching for his radio. But the captain raised a hand. "No." Reynolds froze. "Sir, it's a backup call." "I know what it is," the captain said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were locked onto Reynolds like he was testing him. "Another unit will take it. You stay here." The rejection hit hard, and for the first time, Reynolds felt something new: doubt. Not in them, but in himself. The captain didn't trust him to handle a simple call, and maybe, for the first time, Reynolds was starting to understand why. Then the second twist hit. A car rolled up to the curb, an older model sedan with tinted windows. The engine idled for a second before the door swung open. A woman stepped out, late 40s, sharp eyes, and in her hands a folder. The captain turned to her and nodded. "Thanks for coming." She barely glanced at him before setting her eyes on Reynolds. "Officer Reynolds," she said coolly, "we need to talk." Reynolds' heart skipped. This wasn't just some random official. He recognized her now. *** Detective Lisa, Monroe ** Internal Affairs. His mouth went dry. "What's this about?" Monroe handed the folder to Sanders, who opened it and flipped through the pages. He scanned them quickly, then looked up. "You tell me," Sanders said, holding up a document. "Because according to this isn't the first time you've made a stop like this." Reynolds' blood turned to ice. The captain crossed his arms. "I wanted to believe this was a mistake, Reynolds. But now we've got a problem." The air around them tightened, the silence louder than any siren. Reynolds' pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't just about today anymore. This was about his past. And if they had proof, real proof, then he wasn't just fighting for his career. He was fighting for the truth. Reynolds' breath caught in his throat as the weight of the moment crashed over him. He could feel the sweat gathering at his collar, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It wasn't just a mistake. It was an investigation. His mind raced. How could they have anything on him? He had always followed protocol. At least, that's what he told himself. But as Sanders flipped through the file, his stomach twisted. Monroe took a step forward, eyes sharp. "We've reviewed multiple stops you've made over the past year," she said. "Patterns don't lie." Reynolds shook his head. "What patterns?" She pulled a page from the folder and held it up. "Traffic stops initiated without probable cause. Reports that don't match body cam footage. And in every case, the drivers look a lot like Captain Johnson here." The words hit like a slap. His chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but his mind kept replaying moments, split-second decisions, gut feelings, stops that felt routine. ****Had he been doing this all along without realizing it? The captain watched him carefully. "You're not the first officer to get caught in this cycle, Reynolds. And I know you think you were just doing your job." He paused. "But tell me this, if nobody stopped you today, how long before this turned into something worse?" Reynolds' pulse pounded in his ears. His whole career flashed in front of him, every badge he had ever polished, every oath he had ever sworn. He had never thought of himself as the problem. But standing here now, faced with evidence, he wasn't sure anymore. Then, Monroe reached into the folder and pulled out something else. A photo. She handed it to him without a word. Reynolds hesitated before looking down. His stomach dropped. It was a still image from body cam footage, not from today, but from a stop months ago. A young black man standing outside his car, hands raised, fear in his eyes. And the officer in front of him. Reynolds, His own voice echoed in his head. Step out of the vehicle. The memory crashed back. He had stopped the kid for a broken taillight. But looking at it now, the way he had spoken, the way he had escalated, it wasn't about the taillight, was it? The captain's voice was quiet but firm. "You need to decide, Reynolds. Are you going to be the kind of officer who learns from this, or the kind who pretends it never happened?" His mother seemed to read his mind. "This wasn't just about me," she said. "It never was." He nodded, knowing she was right. This wasn't just one bad cop making one bad decision. It was a reflection of something deeper, something that needed to change. And maybe, just maybe, this was a step toward that change. Back inside the station, officers whispered among themselves. Some looked shaken. Others looked relieved. They had seen what accountability looked like today. Some of them would remember it. Others would pretend it never happened. But one thing was certain: the system had been forced to face itself, even if just for a moment. As the Admiral and his mother walked away, the weight of the moment lingered. The officer had believed his power made him untouchable. But in the end, power isn't about control. It's about responsibility. And when you abuse it, sooner or later, it all comes crashing down.